Welcome to another Ideas That Matter conversation. The person that I have here today is Coleman Flaherty, who is the founder of White Collar Consult. And we're going to be talking a lot about business matters and business ethics, but I think we'll probably range over a lot of other topics as well that are related to it. And Coleman is somebody who's had a long and quite varied career, certain parts of which one might read as contradicting other parts or as bearing upon them, placing them in perspective. And he's got a lot of wisdom to contribute about a number of important topics, including temptations that people face when it comes to thinking about money matters, whether it's actual trading or just how to run budgets and companies and things like that, the judicial system and sentencing, mentorship and why that's so massively important. And still, I think Coleman will probably agree, an overlooked area in a lot of training and education. So I don't I don't think that I need to carry out a huge introduction because
Yeah,
you have a quite famous and rich story to tell. So I'm actually just going to turn it over to you, Coleman, to tell that story about how you got into securities in the first place
hmm
and how it led ultimately to the work that you're doing today.
sure. Well, thanks so much for having me today. I really appreciate it. Been looking forward to getting a chance to talk with you. My name's Coleman Flaherty. I'm 57 years old. I grew up just north of Boston. Grew up in a small family here. Went to Catholic high school. Didn't really excel in academics. Was more interested in sports. Did really well during the sports season, but when the sports were over, not so good. Didn't have a whole lot of choices for college. Went off to college and played Division III hockey,
Hmm.
and academics weren't really my thing. Really more concerned with playing hockey and what type of success that I could see after college, and didn't really realize that would connect with having a college degree and getting certain credentials. Um, Went to one school up in New Hampshire, played hockey up there, got a little bit of homesick, came back to the Boston area, went to a local college. And while I was at this local college playing hockey, some of my friends were close to the graduation, and they were doing things like going on interviews at Merrill Lynch, at Dean Witter prior to being in Morgan Stanley. And there was a lot of chatter about my friend is now working at Merrill Lynch. He's making a lot of money. He just bought a Rolex watch. He's got great suits. He's buying a Mercedes Benz and he's pulling in X amount of money a month. Now, I never really had an interest in the numbers or the stock market or anything like that. What I heard was Mercedes Benz, Rolex watch, nice suits. This could be the path to meeting a nice girl, to getting a nice home and providing for a family and getting a good life. So I said, geez, I think I might want to be a stockbroker. So I had that in my mind for a while. And I was going to college. I was working a summer job for construction. And I bumped into a guy who was once a stockbroker at Morgan Stanley or Smith Barney before Morgan Stanley. And he said, I went to Dartmouth. I've always enjoyed working with my hands. That wasn't for me. They asked you to make 400 cold calls a day. To be in that business, you have to really be okay with rejection. And the guy said, I wasn't, and I couldn't do that business. And I'm happy just to be
Hmm.
working with my hands. He said, if you could do that, you might be okay with it because there's a lot of money to be made. So, at that time in my life, I'm, 20 years old, not really good with face-to-face interaction with people. I didn't really have those skills, whether it be men in a business or social setting or a woman. But I said to myself, I think I could probably handle rejection over the phone. So I went down to the local Sears store in my town, and at the time, Sears owned Dean Witter, and there was an office there, and there was a guy's business card, and there was a sign that said, "I'm looking for help cold calling." So I called him up and pitched him the idea of, can I come in and make some cold calls for you? And he paid me $7 an hour to work, a few nights a week in the summer. And I put the mindset on that I'll just make as many calls as possible. I don't care what people say to me, and I'll work as hard and try to impress this guy. And I did right out of the gate. He said to me, "Geez, can you come back tomorrow? You got a couple of great leads for us. I think we're going to get some accounts out of this." So I said, sure, and I really started to get a knack for it. A short time later, I went off to college and playing hockey and back to dating my girlfriend, and back to, going out and doing what college kids do, partying and drinking and so forth. But I continued to maintain a relationship with the guy and work for him a couple of days a week on my off days. And at the end of the school year, I had a really poor academic year, did a lot of drinking, a lot of partying that year. And I said, I really don't want to go to school anymore. I think I'm eventually going to be in this business. I want to get into it now. And I really pitched him hard on letting me join the company. He said, you got to get a degree. I said, I found another stockbroker that is going to hire me. And he said, well, if that's the decision that you made, I'll talk to the manager. We'll give you a job here. So I was 20 years old without a college degree and now sitting at Dean Witter in Braintree, Massachusetts, getting ready to go into their training program. I couldn't believe it. And they're paying me a salary. And I'm sitting here at 20 years old and I'm now a stockbroker. And this is the time that, that Wall Street was out with Gordon Gekko, and I'm in my office and I'm wearing a suit with suspenders and I'm feeling like I'm on top of the world. And, I'm still going out and drinking a lot. I'm still going out and, partying a lot with my friends, and I'm 20 years old and I had absolutely no knowledge of the securities market. And as I look back on it, I really wasn't qualified to offer anybody any financial advice, So they sent me down to Dean Witter in New York City for a month. I learned some of the products. I learned some of the sales techniques, but still, I'm not even old enough to actually buy liquor at this time, and never mind qualified to really handle, a hard-working man or woman's money. So I came back and, working, 12, 15 hours a day, making 300-400 cold calls a day. And, I can remember some of my early mentors that, that would talk about, things. And again, this is the time of, during the time of Wall Street, and guys would talk about doing unauthorized trades, not speaking with the client, making all kinds of additional commission dollars. There were guys with Porsches in the parking lot, Mercedes Benz, all kinds of fast money. It was really exciting to me. And I continued on with that path. And my mindset started to be, I'm going to do as well as I can do for myself. I don't care about the client. I would say the firm would be second and the client would be third. And, again, more drinking, more alcohol, more partying. At this time, narcotics had entered the picture for me, and I was using cocaine regularly, more than regularly, I would say. And the firm started to get a little tired of me. They started saying, your collection process is poor. We're getting a couple of complaints. So I would get these minor verbal slap on the wrists. And one day the manager called me and he said, you're doing all these transactions. You're great at it with these clients, but nobody's paying. Like, you can't collect the money. So from now on, we're not going to let you do any transactions until you get the money in first, which is basically makes it impossible to do business. So my direct report at that time said to me, I love you. I think I was starting to kind of wear on him a little bit too. And he said, I think a good place for you would be into downtown Boston working at Lehman Brothers. So I get an interview at Lehman Brothers, and there's 250 guys my age, all, making 400 or 500 phone calls a day, making millions of dollars, drinking, using cocaine regularly. And I said that this is my type of place. And it's, one block from all the bars where all the brokers and the young ladies spend time together. So I said, this is for me. And I went there, and what I've heard over the years is it was a great opportunity, but I brought myself with me. And I continue the same habits of, working 14 hours a day, grinding it out, but continuing to drink, continuing to use drugs. And every time I would take one step forward, I would take 2 or 3 backwards, and money started to run low. And a guy down the street offered me a little bit of money to come work with him. And I took that, and then so on and so on. And my drinking, my drug use, and my continued bad behavior within the business of doing unauthorized trades, not looking after the client, led me to start getting fired on a regular basis. And I went through, over the course of 3 years, 13 different jobs at stockbrokering companies in Boston, to the point where I pretty much became unhireable. I was running out of companies to go work at. And, like the last job I had, I actually went into a member New York Stock Exchange firm. The guy said to me, we're not going to hire you as a stockbroker. We're going to hire you as a trainee. We're going to let you come in. If you prove yourself, we'll give you a job. And I worked there for 6 months. I did really well performance-wise. I continued to struggle with my drinking and drug use. And at the end of 6 months, they said, you did a great job here, but all this other stuff we can't have. We're not going to bring you on full time. So, a couple of things started happening. I left the brokerage business. I was working for a telecommunications company, and a couple of things were happening at home. And my family just said to me, we love you. We think it's really time that you go to rehab and start to clean up your act. And it's what I needed. So I went to a 21-day program and worked on my sobriety with my alcohol and cocaine addiction. And I came out and, I made, recovery in my family number one in my life. They said, go to 90 AA meetings in 90 days. I probably went to 300 and
Oh, wow.
continue to do that, continue to build my reputation back up in Boston, in other cities. And I had a friend come to me one day and said, I saw you at the Bruins game last week. You look fantastic. I'm hearing good things. I know you always wanted to get down to Wall Street. I'd like to offer you a position. So it was a dream of mine to get down and work on Wall Street. So I took that position. I moved down to New York City. I had a group of guys down in Boston that were working down there, and they were loving New York. They provided me with a place to live. So I went down to New York City, sober, clear. Went to work at a brokerage company and started really excelling in the brokerage company, opening up a lot of new accounts, bringing new clients in, generating a ton of commissions. I would think that my last year while I was actively drinking and drugging, I made $13,000. I think I made $250,000 my first year in sobriety. So really
Wow.
doing well. And, but no recovery, just not drinking and drugging, no spiritual recovery, no clear-mindedness, and decided I could do better on my own. So kind of, left that opportunity and bounced around to a couple of different firms and just started having the same problems in sobriety that I was when I was drinking, difficult relationships. My business practices haven't changed. I was still doing unauthorized trades. I was not caring about the client. It was me, the firm, and then the client, and making a lot of money. And I just felt like I'm on Wall Street. This is what everybody does. Everybody makes commissions. They take care of themselves first. They go to strip clubs. They go to parties. They buy nice clothes. They buy nice cars. This is where I am, and this is what I'll continue to do. And it was like maybe 4 or 5 years that I was into that and continuing to change firms and, continuing to kind of struggle in my personal life. And I met a guy that was a mentor of mine in Alcoholics Anonymous. And he said, I think maybe it's time that you get involved in the 12 steps and start to change the way that you live. And I went through, I started going through that process and I really had some life-changing experiences and started going out and making some amends and clearing up my life and started feeling really good about my life. And I got a job at a brokerage firm in New York where all the guys the majority of the leadership was sober and Alcoholics Anonymous. I felt like it was a good place for me. They were doing all of their
Yeah.
business in the United Kingdom. So I started getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning, going in the office, prospecting clients in the UK. And I started, again, making more money than I ever made, in my life. And it was good. Things were moving in the right direction. I got an opportunity to move back to Boston. Prior to that, the state of Massachusetts, because of all my infractions, had barred me from working in the state. And now that I was sober a number of years and I didn't have any compliance problems, they said, we'll give you another opportunity to move home and come work in Boston. So took a job at a company in Boston. And, although I had done the steps in AA and was working on myself, still wasn't quite ready to make that change. And, I was working at a company in Boston, was going fine, was making a good amount of money. And I said to myself, I think I can do better. And I went off to join another brokerage firm. And while I was there, I decided to start raising money on my own to buy my own brokerage firm and continuing to do unauthorized trades, continuing to do bad business, and taking several trips a year over to London and Belfast, Northern Ireland, raising several $1,000,000 for my own brokerage firm. And one of the clients was unhappy with the progress of the investment one day and called the SEC. And they said, we'd like to have a meeting with you. And my attorney told me to decline. And at that point, they barred me from participating in any type of financial services. So I could no longer be a stockbroker, could no longer be affiliated with any brokerage firm. And, I look back on it and where I was at that time in my life, I kind of gave up that opportunity. They call it the ticket in the business. I gave up the ticket pretty easily. I made some decisions based on selfishness and greediness and, gave up an opportunity to make a good living for the next 20, 30 years. So now I'm in my late 30s. I have no license to practice. I just bought a home, just bought a new car, and didn't know what I was going to do and had no income. And a friend of mine who I had worked with came to me and said, "Hey, I'm in this business that's pretty interesting. I'm a stock promoter." And I said, "Well, what does that mean?" He said, "Well, I go out and I tout companies. I tell my network about them, and companies will either pay me cash or they'll give me free trading stock in their companies as compensation." And I said, "Yeah, I'm going to try to get my license back. This is really what I want to do. I'm going to talk to my attorney." And he said, "Well, I've got this one deal. Why don't we work on it together?" So I had a network of people that I could tell about it. and I told some people about the stock. The stock worked out pretty well, and we both made $100,000 for doing very little work. And I said, wow, that was easy, no cold calling, no getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And he said, yeah, why don't we do a couple more? So we continued to do that, and that worked out pretty well. And I decided, at that point, like I have in the past, like I don't really need this guy anymore. I'm doing all the work. I'm going to go set up my own IR company. So I established a couple different web properties, 24/7 stock alert, penny stock explosion, global equity report. I established those and started putting some of the money that I'd earned to work advertising on Google and Yahoo, building up subscriber bases. And I started to get my name out in the industry like I did when I was a stockbroker, and people would start to hire me, $2,000, $3,000, $5,000. And pretty soon people were paying me $50,000 to $100,000 to send off a couple emails. So, now I'm at a point in my life where there's no grunt work on the phone. There's no cold calling. There's no regulation. I don't have a license, and I'm making $250,000 a month. This is great. This is a dream come true. I'm living in South Boston. I'm in my 30s. I'm still going to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. I'm even though I'm helping people sell stock, I'm technically not breaking the law because I'm disclosing what I'm making. So I feel I'm justifying to myself, I am helping people sell stock to the public, but I'm justifying to myself that it's all legal. So I just continue doing that, and things are going fine. And I connected with an old Wall Street buddy of mine who had kind of been in that business, and he said, you're doing really well, but the real money is made is being the client, not the provider like you're doing. The real money is made as the guy that owns the public company that's selling the stock. That's what we should do. So I said, okay. So I had met an attorney that had a public company for sale. It was maybe $175,000. And myself and this old Wall Street partner, we decided to buy that public company. And at the time, I had another individual that was building a real estate social media company. This is right around the time of 2006, 2007, when property markets are starting to go down, and he felt like it would be a good turnaround play. So I said, look, I'm not a Silicon Valley hedge fund. I'm a private investor. Between the two of us, we'll give you $250,000 to build your company, and we'll see what you do with it, and we'll own the free trading stock. So we bought this public shell together. It came with some free trading shares. So myself and my partner owned all the free trading shares. We took the public company, and the first thing that we did was we did a reverse split, which means every share in the company gets reversed down to almost nothing. So we did a 50,000 to 1 reverse split, which means every previous shareholder that owned 50,000 shares now only owns 1 share, which made a lot of people unhappy right out of the gate. And then we would issue our contact person that was running the company a control block of 25 or 30 million shares. And then we would start to convert our shares into the company. So being individual investors, we could convert up to 5% of the total outstanding. So if there were 50 million shares, we could convert 2.5 million shares each. My friend had several contacts down in the Bahamas, and I had several contacts down there and contacts in Switzerland. So we issued, I think, 35, 40 million shares, but we were able to control all of the free trading shares somewhere in the ballpark of 10 or 12 million. So that was my first deal. We did a stock promotion. I think on my first deal, I made $1 million. My friend made a little bit more. We gave the company $250,000. He was looking for a lot more money. He never built a web property or anything. He was more turned into a think tank. So that relationship ended. We gave him some money. He put some money into it. He was negative. We were positive $1 million each. And we gave him a little bit of money to exit the shell. And we kind of sat back and celebrated our victory and waited for what was next. And what was next was I was at the gym one day, and a local businessman that I knew came up to me and said, hey, I see you driving a Range Rover. I hear that you've got all these different businesses going on. Would you anyway consider lending me some money? And I said, well, I don't even know you. Why would I lend you any money? Yeah. And he said, I need money for my ticket company. I'm really looking to expand it. And I said, well, I've been interested in the ticket business for some time. Let me tell you what my business model is. So myself and my partner met with him, and we decided that we would invest $250,000 to help him expand his business. So we put that money into the company. We already owned the public shell from the real estate deal. We did the same thing. We did a reverse split. We took everybody that owned 50,000 shares. We brought them down to 1. We took our convertible shares. We put them into the market. And then voila, once again, we own all the free trading shares. The public doesn't own any, and he owns the control block. So we, we started making plans, putting together news announcements, and we started building this company. Cityside Ticket is the next hot thing. That it was going to be the next StubHub. It was going to be the next Ticketmaster.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
started going out and painting that picture. Along the way, we held a kickoff party in Boston, and we invited a lot of stock promoters, a lot of ticket brokers, some people from the sports industry. And we got approached by a guy that we had never met before at the party. And he said, I own the ticket company, and I'm going to need a little bit more money, to get things going. And we didn't know who he was. And he identified himself to us and realized that he was friends with the owner of the ticket company. And he was a high ranking organized crime figure in Boston. So, right away, we knew that the deal was in trouble. We were going to do our same business practice, but we knew at that point that, probably the company was not going to go anywhere. So we finished our obligation with our investment, and we went off and we did the same thing that we're always going to do. We put shares into the market. We sold shares in Switzerland. We sold shares in the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos, and we controlled the entire float. And on this deal, we made a little bit more. I made about $1.5 million, and my partner made close to $2 million. So we, financially, we did really well on it. We started getting a lot of shareholder complaints. The CEO of the company was complaining; he was looking for more money. There was a bit more wreckage on this one than there was before. And when we were done with it, we continued to put stock into the market. And by the time we started the offering at 50 cents, by the time the deal was over, we were selling stock at a tenth of a penny. So we had sold stock all the way down. So we continued on with that. We tried a couple of other projects to put in the shell, and nothing really worked. Nothing was manifesting. And we had a couple of deals along the way that weren't really working. And my partner was trying to bring more and more deals into the fold. And he called me on a Sunday night, back in 2009, 2010. He said, can you get to a place where you're quiet? I need to talk with you. And I got into a room, and he said, I've been hanging around with this guy, having drinks and having lunch with him, and I had a fallout with him. And he said to me that about a month ago, he took me to a meeting in Boston. And at that meeting, we talked about doing some dirty business, some stock promotion, some kickbacks. And he told me the meeting was with an FBI agent, and I was videotaped and audio taped, and your name was brought up. And he said, but I wouldn't really buy, I think he was trying to scare me. And I said, that's a lot of information for someone that's just trying to scare you, And he said, no, I don't think there's anything there, So I kind of put it out of my mind. And then, a short time after that, I started getting some subpoenas from the SEC in Boston on a couple of deals that I was working on. And I brought an attorney in, and my attorney, that attorney referred me to someone else. That gentleman contacted the SEC, and they said, we're gonna have the subpoena shortly. And we never got the subpoena. And I contacted the gentleman that referred me to my attorney, who was a former Washington SEC executive, and he said, I think that's really bad news, because at the time they called you, they would have had the subpoena ready, and the only reason that you didn't get the subpoena is it probably came down from the Justice Department not to send it to you because there was an ongoing investigation. And I said, do you think so? He said, I'm sure of it. And nothing happened, so I kind of just put it out of my mind that I think everything will be okay. If I don't hear anything, then I think everything's going to be okay. Maybe 6 months later, I had hired a stock promoter to do a deal for me, and he didn't perform. And I was complaining to him, and he sent me an email and said, your deals are all terrible deals. No wonder why the FBI is breathing down your neck. And, again, nothing happened. And I just kind of said to myself, maybe that's just someone that's, threatening me or something. So I just continued on with my business, continued promoting stocks, continued trying to do more deals. And during the time, just feeling really uneasy, knowing that my actions and work are not matching with what my recovery is supposed to be like. I'm not feeling good. I'm feeling just really uncomfortable in my life. Myself and my wife are trying to have a child. We were unsuccessful. And I'm in maybe my second or third year of marriage, and making plenty of money. Things are going okay on the outside, uneasy all the time. And Tuesday after Easter, 2012, April, I drove into the office, and I used to get into the office somewhere between 4:30 and 5 in the morning. And my office was in Boston, so it wouldn't be unusual for people to be getting in their cars commuting. And I got out of my car, and I saw two guys with suits on, and they said, hey, Coleman, good morning. How's it going? And, I thought to myself, like, this can't be good. And they walked over, and, the guy had a long wallet. He took it out, and it was the middle of the night, really. It was 4 o'clock in the morning, and I could
Yeah.
see the blue letters that said FBI. And I said, I just got the thought, you're not getting out of this one. This is there's a long road ahead for you here, in your life. And a couple of years before that, myself and my friend Peter had fired an employee for drinking and drug use and just really acting up in the office. And he had called the FBI and said, these guys know where Whitey Bulger is. We had an office in South Boston.
Oh,
And
yeah,
so the
yeah.
FBI came to my house 3 or 4 years before that. They said, we know this is not true, but we got to follow up on everything. So when the agent came to see me that day, he said, we came to see you a few years ago about Whitey Bulger. We want to talk about that and a couple of other things. Let's go upstairs. You're not under arrest. Everything's okay. So I said, okay. So I got in the elevator. I said, is this about Whitey Bulger? And he said, unfortunately, no. So we went upstairs to my office. And again, it's the middle of the night. He had his briefcase there. He took his briefcase out with a tape recorder. Pardon me. And he played a tape of me talking with someone about doing a pump and dump. And he said, do you recognize that voice? That's you. And I didn't say anything. And he took out a folder, and in the folder were the charging documents. And he said, right now, he had the exact amount of stock that I sold and my partner sold. He said, right now, it's 9 years in prison. That's what you're looking at, 9 years. And he said, you're not under arrest today. We're going to give you an opportunity to cooperate with us and plead guilty. If you choose so, and you're truthful with us and you don't break any other laws, we'll do our best to help you minimize your sentence. If you don't choose to do that, if you want to fight this and go to trial, there's a lot of other deals that you've done that we haven't even talked about yet. And, I was sitting on the couch. He was sitting next to me on my couch in the office. There was a picture of my wife there on the mantle. He said, you're going to have to go home and tell her you're not going to see her for 20 years. Is that what you want to do? He said, we know that your brother's sick. We know that your father's old. You're not going to see your family again. So we want to know everything about city side tickets and all your friends right now. I said, let me talk with my attorney, and I'll agree to cooperate. And he said, call me by 1 o'clock today, or don't call me. And so I contacted my attorney, and my attorney said, let me give him a call. And he called the agent, and he called me back, and he said, I don't think it's as bad as what you're thinking here. The term he used was, I don't think that they want to hang you from the highest tree. He said, I have a meeting with them tomorrow. Let me go see what it's all about. And then we'll talk then. So I was in my office and felt a little bit easier. I had another stock promoter giving me a presentation. My attorney called and he said, do you have some clean clothes and a suit handy? I said, yeah. He goes, put the suit on and get over to my office. The U.S. Attorney's office wants to see you right now. It's a lot worse than what I thought. Ooh. So, I put the suit on. I went over to his office, and I walked into his office. He was at a major law firm in Boston. And I got the feeling from him walking down the hall that it was bad. He had a manila folder. And he said, they think they have enough information to put you in jail for 100 months. And he said, if you want to cooperate, I think that there's an opportunity that you might be able to survive this one, either, not get jail time or get very little. If we decide to go to trial, my feeling is they're going to charge you with a lot of other things, and you could probably be looking at 20 years in prison. So he said, what do you want to do? I said, let's go talk with them. So we went right across the street, literally to the federal courthouse. And I was about to walk in, and he said to me, what we're going to do today is a meeting. It's called a proffer. And he said, this is a meeting that any information that you give them, they can't use it against you. And he said, I'm going to tell you that any questions that they're going to ask you today, I believe they already know the answer to. So if you lie to them, the meeting is going to be over right away. So we went upstairs and got in the U.S. Attorney's office, and everybody was very nice. Thanks so much for coming. It's great to meet you. The door closed, and then the tune changed very quickly.
Yeah.
No windows in the office. I would say there were probably 5 or 6 federal prosecutors, and the rest were FBI agents. And they started, asking me questions. Tell us about this. Tell us about that. You put the CEO of the ticket company on TV on Fox News. I said, I didn't do that, and the prosecutor said to me, I feel like you're lying already. I think I should just end the interview right now and charge you today, and I said the PR company that we hired. And so over time, they started getting more comfortable and feeling like I was telling them the truth. And then at one point they said, we need to take a quick break. And we went down the cafeteria for a couple of hours. They called us back in, and the prosecutor says to me, if it was up to me today, you would have already been arrested, would be charging you. But for some reason, these 2 FBI agents, they think that you're a good person that's made some mistakes, and they want to work with you. So we're going to give you an opportunity to cooperate. That's going to include taping people over the phone, possibly
Oh.
testifying at trial, wearing body recorders, things of that nature. Is that something that you want to sign up for today? And again, my attorney had already told me that I believe that if you don't sign up for that, you're probably going to get a superseding indictment. You're probably going to be looking at sentencing guidelines north of 20 years. So I said yes. And so I walked out, and the agent said to me, like, I could tell that recently by listening to your phone that you've been trying to change your life. Unfortunately, it was a little too late. And we want you to come down to the FBI office in Boston on Monday, and we're going to start the cooperation process. And, so I went home that night, and, just full of fear, terrified. That was a Friday. Got up Monday morning, went into the office, went to the gym, and made my way over to the FBI office in Boston. And they told me to bring my laptop, bring any of my files. And I went over there, and I just started discussing cases with them that I was involved in, things that I had done, people that I knew that were high profile promoters in the penny stock business. Just general information that I was given to them at that point. I had two phones at that point, a personal phone, and I had a phone that was a drop phone that I used just for business deals. It was a prepaid phone. They took that phone and they put their own recording device on that phone, and they said, don't use this phone anymore for any personal calls. Only use this phone to talk to stock promoters in your dirty deals. So I started I was pretty well established in the network of stock promoting. I started receiving phone calls daily from different stock promoters about deals that they were doing, about deals I was being invited into. At the time, the FBI would be listening to my calls, and they would call me afterwards, and they would debrief me on what the calls were all about. And certain people, nothing happened with, and other people, they started building cases on. When I started the process, the FBI agent that I was working with said, this is probably going to go on a year and a half. I had been in that business for a while, had a lot of contacts, had a very successful marketing company at one point. So people just continued to call me. So now it's not a year and a half. Now we're 3 years into it. Now we're 4 years into it. About a year and a half into the process, myself and my wife got a call that we were chosen to adopt a child. So we had an opportunity to adopt a 1-year-old baby girl in Montana. So I had to go out to Montana for a month. And while I was in Montana, I was in constant contact with FBI agents, prosecutors, and my attorney while I was in Montana. So I came back. So now, not only the stress of going to prison for myself and my wife, now I have a child, and the stress was incredible. So I'm continuing on with maybe, I don't know, 3.5, 4 years into the process. And one of my co-conspirators, who was my attorney that assisted us in the documentation to write the opinion letters to get our stock cleared to trade at brokerage firms that helped us break the 5% rule, was then arrested. Oh. And I had a feeling that he probably would not plead guilty, that he would go to trial. So along with wearing a body recorder, which I did, I believe, over 10 times, going to private meetings wearing a body recorder and taping thousands of phone calls and recording thousands of text messages, now I had to prepare myself to go testify at trial and sit down and testify against someone that I had probably talked to hundreds of times, that I had met in person. I wouldn't consider my best buddy, but I consider him a friend, someone that helped us make a lot of money. And I spent 7 days on the witness stand, 13 hours of testimony, being cross-examined and being examined by his attorney. And just went up there and did a lot of preparation with the U.S. Attorney's Office. And just, they said, no matter what you do, you have to tell the truth. Just don't go up and lie. So I just told the truth about everything that happened. And he was later convicted on 9 counts of wire fraud and sentenced to 48 months in prison. And myself and my partner both testified against him during that period of time. So it was a very stressful period. I would say, I guess I'll back up and say maybe 6 months prior to that, my FBI handler came to my office one day and said, we have a little problem. We believe that you might have done something to break the law during your cooperation, and you need to get your attorney and come down to the FBI office on Monday, and the prosecutors want to talk with you. I knew I hadn't, but I was concerned. So I went and saw my attorney, and my attorney said to me, what is the deal in question that they're talking about? And I told him, and he said, there might be a conflict. Let me step outside the office and we'll come right back. So I knew there was something going on.
Okay.
So I went down. We went down to the FBI office the following week, and the prosecutor says to me when I walk in the door, he says, "I hope I didn't cause you any angst. There's no problem here today." I said, "Well, yeah, you did, and especially
Yeah,
over the
yeah.
weekend, you kind of ruined my weekend, because the FBI agent said to me, your 5K1 letter might be in jeopardy." No problem. And they started talking about the deal, and my attorney's sitting there, and everything is going fine, and maybe a week later, a family member of mine gets a call from a stock promoter. It says, "How's Coleman doing?" And it was a very unusual call. And just tell him that we're asking for him. We hope everything's going well in his life. And I called the FBI agent up. I said, "I'm feeling kind of uneasy. Someone just called a family member of mine and asked
Oh,
about me." And the FBI
yeah,
agent
yeah.
said to me, "Give me a minute. I'll call you back." And he said, "There's a major group that you're cooperating against that now knows about your cooperation. We don't know how they know about it, but they know about your cooperation. And sit tight and I'll get back to you." And there was some speculation that my attorney might have breached my cooperation. We never really understood if that happened, but the U.S. Attorney's Office said to me at that point, "We think it's best that you select a new attorney." So now I'm in the process of like the last few miles of my cooperation, my pretrial, getting ready to be sentenced. Very stressful. Have a baby at home. Um, I've already made full restitution to the U.S. Attorney's Office of $1.3 million. So my finances are dwindling, and I don't have an attorney. And I call up this attorney in Boston who just left the U.S. Attorney's Office. I said, "Can you help me?" He says, "Come in." He said, I had an agreement with the U.S. Attorney's Office that I couldn't um, work on any cases that I was involved with when I was there, but I'm going to have a friend of mine call you. It's going to be okay.
Okay.
So I get downstairs to my car, and I got a call from Brian Kelly. And Brian had just retired from the U.S. Attorney's Office, and the last case that he prosecuted was Whitey Bulger. And
Oh,
he was extremely, extremely respected in the Department of Justice. And I went to see him, and not only a great attorney, but one of the most amazing human beings I've ever met in my life. And just assured me that he was going to do his best for me. And he went in. I said, "Do you know the prosecutor?" And he says, I think so. She was at my retirement dinner a couple of weeks ago. Let me go talk with her and see what she says." And then immediately he was able to rework my plea agreement and get me a small reduction in what my sentencing guidelines were. And he was with me the entire way, and just reassuring me all the time. Just a tremendous human being. And so I testified in that trial, and it was time to go into sentencing. And he had a strong relationship with the government. They were pleased with my work. All through the process, everybody from the FBI agent to my first attorney, they all told me that probation was impossible. My sentencing guidelines were 78 to 97 months.
oh,
And they all told me that probation was impossible. The first day that I met my FBI handler, he said, your numbers are way too high. As I was getting ready to go into my sentencing, one of the agents that I was working with said to me, "Well, we can really see the way that you change as a person over the past 4 years. There's other people that have done what you're doing. They've broken the law multiple times. They're trying to still play both sides of the fence. We've been watching you. We've been monitoring your phone calls. We know that you're in a completely different business. At this point, I had gotten into the fitness industry. I'd bought a CrossFit gym. And they said, we know that you're out of the game. We can see, and you were honest with us about your cooperation. You did great work for us, and we can't guarantee anything. But as far as our office in Boston goes, we're going to convey to the prosecutors that we would like you to get probation." And I had never heard anything like that in 4 years. So I can
yeah,
remember,
yeah.
it was like a Thursday night in the middle of the winter in the U.S. Attorney's Office at like 8 o'clock. I just got done listening to some tapes, and I literally had tears in my eyes. I said, I'm finally getting something that things could be okay here. So, the testifying in the trial was over with. My attorney worked on his sentencing memorandum for me. I put together maybe 45, 46 letters from people that I knew from Alcoholics Anonymous, people that I knew from church, from people that I knew from all these different areas in my life. And they were all great letters and talked about how I help people in the recovery community. And then the prosecutor wrote her letter of recommendation, which came attached with a 5K1 letter, which was a request from the government to the judge to depart from the sentencing guidelines. And I called up my FBI handler. I said, "Have you seen the letter?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "How's it look?" He goes, "I've never seen anything better. I
Hmm.
think you're good." And a couple of days before that, my co-conspirator went in for sentencing and got 6 months of home confinement. So my FBI handler says to me, "You're all set. You're not going to go to prison. It's over." So I went into sentencing that day in June and 2016, and I went in there. I had a lot of family with me: my mother, my father, my wife, some friends from AA, and I walked in and. Prior to sentencing, I said to my attorney, "What do you think about the judge?" He said, "She's very fair. I think we're good. Your SEC case judge is a lot harder. I'd be more concerned if I had him." So he walked in, and the judge says to me, "I'm very concerned about this." She says out loud, "I'm very concerned about this case. I'm very worried." And there's all these different victims here. And she said, "And I received 46 letters from all these people that know Mr. Flaherty that talk about how great a person he is, but not one of those letters talked about how remorseful he was in
Oh,
any way or talked about the victims in any way. And I'm really worried about that," she said. And, it started to hit me at that time. I said, I've been just kind of playing a hustle game all through this to get out of it. And although I wasn't engaging in that same behavior, at that point, I don't know how much I had changed. I knew I wasn't going back to penny stocks. I knew that I wasn't going to do that again. I knew that I was on to the next phase of my life, but I hadn't really come to a point where I said, "Wow, a lot of people were hurt here." And she said to me, a lot of people were hurt because of your conduct. You realize that?" And so she said, "I'm not prepared to go to probation today." And my heart just dropped. And I said, "Wow, I'm
hmm.
going to prison." And and my attorney got up and said, his co-conspirator didn't get a prison sentence. And she says, "Different judge, different perspective." And the assistant U.S. attorney really argued on my behalf for over 2 hours, talked about all the cooperation work that I had done, how she had seen me change as a person over the course of 4 years, how I was a different person. I think she made the comment that this man shouldn't spend one day in prison. So, normally these sentencing hearings, they might last a half hour, an hour. I was coming up on 3 hours, and my attorney says to me, "I think I might be able to get you home confinement. Would you be okay with that?" I said, "Yeah, I think so."
Yeah.
The guy from the first company, the social media company, showed up in court as a victim and said that he had put some of his own money into the company and that he was defrauded. And to backtrack a little bit, I had met him in Alcoholics Anonymous. I had helped him in his sobriety, and then he had later asked me to be an investor in his company. And the judge was questioning him, saying, "Did he defraud you? Did he take money from you?" And he didn't take money from me, but he didn't fulfill his obligation, and that caused the company to go out of business. And she had said that she wouldn't send me to prison, but now it was starting to go the other way. And
Oh,
the prosecutor said to this gentleman, "Didn't you tell me on several occasions that Mr. Flaherty helped you save your life and that you wouldn't be sober today if it wasn't for his help and counsel in Alcoholics Anonymous?" And he said, "Yeah, that's true." And the judge said, "Okay, I won't send you to prison then." And she said, "I'm going to give you 1 year of home confinement." And it wasn't what I was expecting. I was disappointed because I thought I was getting the probation at that point.
yeah.
I had cooperated for 5 years. I had paid back the entire restitution. But in light of what I was facing, I was extremely grateful after I got some time to reflect to the judge for giving me a second opportunity in life. And I was able to go on and raise my daughter, which would have been catastrophic if I had to go to prison for years. I was able to establish a new business in the data brokerage in assisting people in white collar. And I was able to really get connected again in Alcoholics Anonymous and start working with a new sponsor and going through the steps again and really starting to take a look at my conduct and how selfish I was and how my old ways weren't working, how my old ideas were producing results of zero for me. And I'm still, in that period of reconstruction now. And, FBI came to see me in 2012. I pled guilty in 2014, sentenced in 2016, finish up my home confinement in 2017. And I feel like I'm still in the process of reconstructing in my life right now. I'm 57 years old. I've been sober in Alcoholics Anonymous for 30 years. But as far as the emotional sobriety that Bill Wilson, the founder, talks about, in so many ways, I still feel like I'm just beginning in that, in that process and still working with it. on a regular basis. So, much like when I started, drinking and using drugs, when I had to come into Alcoholics Anonymous, I put my family through a lot, and I wish I didn't have to do that. But the contacts that I made in some of the ideas and the changes that I made in my life was worth having to go through that period to get into Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you said to me, before, like, hey, would you be happy that you got arrested by the FBI and you have 3 felonies right now? I wish I could have avoided that. I wish that there was an easier way. But for me, like, I feel like I've saved my life going forward. And I don't mean to be corny in saying that, but I feel like now I've got a path in my life that can be constructive, where I can help others, where I can raise my daughter, where I can continue on my marriage, where I can live out the rest of my life, however long that is, in a positive way. And I just don't feel like I could do that if I was still out there, selling penny stocks and,
Yeah.
getting out of stock and helping people sell stock. Like, I just don't feel like I could fulfill that type of emotional sobriety if I was doing that.
I had a lot of, in my first job, I was teaching at Indiana State Prison for 6 years. And I had a
Mhm.
lot of guys who would express this common sentiment. They'd say, "It sucks here. This is terrible. I wouldn't wish this on my enemies, but I really
Mhm.
needed to be here,
Yeah.
and I wish I could have
Mhm.
avoided that." But being the kind of person that I was at the time that I committed my crimes, got sentenced, this has actually been a net positive for me, even
Yeah.
though
Mhm.
it's a terrible place to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah. Yeah. When I got sentenced, and maybe 3 or 4 days later, I went into the probation office. They put the ankle bracelet on me, and you know, I structured it well. Where I was allowed to go to AA meetings, I was allowed to go to spiritual direction. I was involved with this church in Boston, this Franciscan church. So I'm still involved with some of the priests there today. The one of the priests that married me was my spiritual director. I went and I
Yeah.
sat down with him. I had the ankle bracelet on, and he says, Coleman, some lessons can only be learned in prison. I'm so happy that you didn't have to learn yours there. And I mean, I
Yeah.
just take a look, and I say, like, you know, people that might have, recorded me or cooperated against me. That's just all part of the game. Like, my behavior is what got me there. So, in 2014, my FBI handler calls me up and says, you're going to be pleading guilty. Like, in the next couple of days, my attorney calls me and says, we're going in 3 days before Christmas.
Okay.
So Merry Christmas. So I go in there, and and at this time, with the relationship with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI, I'm thinking that probation is moving in the right direction. And my judge says to me, I'm going to let you self-report to prison when I sentence you. And I say, whoa, that doesn't make me feel comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the FBI agent says, yeah, that's kind of unusual. They don't normally say that. So I'm thinking right away that the judge is not loving me. So before I go to my pre-sentence interview, which is a very important part of the process, and I'll talk about that, how I help people with that, I had to go down to the U.S. Marshal's office to get processed. And I get to the door with my attorney, and they're very aggressive. They say no attorneys allowed. They bring me down the hall, and I'm petrified. I think they're going to put me in a holding cell. And I've got arrested a few times when I was younger for public drinking. For things of that nature,
Yeah.
and for public drinking, things of that nature. I'm just always afraid of jail cells. And they didn't. They took my picture. They asked me some questions, and they were very aggressive with me. And I'm sitting there and just full of fear. And I look to the right of me, and there's a holding cell there. And the marathon bomber is making his initial appearance that day.
Oh, wow.
And he's jumping up and down, and he's ripping the cage all over the place. And I say to myself, I'm 19 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. I came from a good family. My parents don't behave like this at all. Like, how did I end up here? Like, I'm sitting in a room right now, getting processed by the U.S. Marshals, pleading guilty, looking at 100 months in prison next to the marathon bomber. It was really a moment of awakening for me. I was just like, how did I get here? Like, I really need to make some changes going forward. And
Yeah, and that's actually, so I've got a bunch of things I want to ask you about
yeah,
before we go
yeah.
on to the next part. But that's actually kind of a good jumping off point. Your story is one of let's call it not having the right guidance and getting messages that lead you astray. And then, of course, you had your own role to play in it, and it kind of
Mhm.
reinforces each other. And then eventually you get caught up in stuff, and you have this. I'm sure that's not the first moment where you said to yourself, "What the hell am I doing?" What is
Right.
going on with me? I mean, to go to AA in the first place
Yeah.
requires that sort of thing. And so I'm curious as to your thoughts on, do you think that people who are going astray, do you think they need to have those sorts of moments of not just dissatisfaction, but like looking at themselves and saying, "Man, I'm a screw up, and what am I doing? This can't be the right way. I don't know what the right way is yet, but
Mhm.
there's got to be something other than this." I mean, some people seem to be lucky and meander their way around. They screw up a bit and they
Mhm.
they right themselves. I think for a lot of the rest of us, we screw up in big ways for a long time, and then
Yeah.
we have to have that proverbial come to Jesus moment.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I don't think it's necessary to get arrested and be facing prison time to
Yeah.
have that like come to Jesus moment, right? Like I can tell you that I had not great mentors, whether it be at Dean Witter or Lehman Brothers, or even when I get into the penny stock business. I said to a guy that was a big promoter in Vancouver, I'm launching my first deal. Just make sure that you own all the stock and you keep it in one place. From a profit from a profit motive, that's the right advice.
Yeah.
From a legality moment, that doing that is going to put you in jail if an FBI agent hears it. So those are the mentors that I was exposed to. I didn't have to choose to go that route. I could have done my own exploration, talked to an attorney, maybe got someone else's opinion over at Lehman Brothers that had a $100 million business that was doing business the right way. But that's the way I was wired. Like I think when I'm in a program of recovery, they say like the bottles and the drugs, they're just a symptom. Like I'm just I've got some deeper issues that require me to do some work to take a look at myself. And so at that point, whether it be I'm self-conscious, I'm fearful of other people's opinion. I've got
Yeah.
I want people to like me, whatever it is. Something is driving me to say, I'm not really interested in being a stockbroker, but I hear they're driving Mercedes Benzes over there and they're wearing Rolex watches. Maybe people will like me better if I go ahead and do this. So that's how I was basing my decisions. And I wasn't basing my decisions on like, this is a career. Like a lot of guys I work with at Dean Witter are still there today, 37 years later, getting ready
Okay.
to retire. It was a
Yeah.
career for them. It's like they were working at JP Morgan, or it's like they were working at Exxon. This has been a career for them. For me, it was like, how can I go out, make a bunch of money and look good? So I think if people are kind of like have the right people in place and they're open to listening to that type of advice, that type of mentorship, I don't believe that they need to lose a license, face
Hmm.
prison time, lose a career. I feel like those things can be corrected if they're open to the message.
So in a way, it's having the right person at the right time when you screw up to help
Mm-hmm.
you get back on track. And one of the things I was particularly curious about, and you frame it very well in terms of like money is the thing that opens the doors to all these other, let's call them signifiers of success. The Rolex watch is an emblem,
Mm-hmm.
or having a certain car, being able to
Mm-hmm.
go to certain restaurants or clubs, all of that sort of stuff. And so back in, I'm roughly the same age as you, just a little bit
Mm-hmm.
younger, and we can think
Mm-hmm.
back to what things were like in the 70s, 80s, 90s, essentially pre-internet permeation of all of our aspects of life. And we were getting these messages on TV and in so many other ways from people. This is what success looks like, and it's all in consumer products and money
Right. Mm-hmm.
terms. And so I'm curious, do you think that it's about the same level of difficulty for young people, teens and 20s today, or do you think that it's more difficult for them? There's more pressure. They're constantly getting pitched, images of what the successful life is, maybe more saturated than what we had, or are they better off? Do they have greater opportunities for figuring out how not to go down the wrong paths?
I think there's more challenges.
Okay.
I got sentenced. I was on home confinement, and a friend of mine who I work with on Wall Street said, "I've got a data company. I'm selling, leads and data to stockbrokers." I didn't do any of that, but to merchant cash advance brokers, to solo brokers, mortgage brokers.
Yeah.
I too am he said, I too am a convicted felon for securities. I've been able to reinvent myself and find a good way to make money. And I started working with him before I launched my own company. And I do a lot of lead generation and data in the merchant cash advance industry, which is small business lending, where a merchant can't get a bank loan. He gets a loan at a really high rate from a private funding company. I'm not in that business, but I do marketing and data for that business. And, on Instagram, on IG, I mean, I see some of my clients 24, 25 years old, driving Rolls Royces, driving
Mm.
Lamborghinis, not the $10,000 Rolex watch, the $300,000 Richard Mille watch. And I see more money that these guys are making than they've made in the penny stock business that I was in. And I know some of these guys are cutting corners and breaking laws, and they, where back then it was important to have a Giorgio Armani suit that cost $1,000 for these guys. It's
Yeah.
important to have an AP watch that is $120,000, or they're not fitting in within their business. And there's no mentorship. There's no regulation, in that business and many others. So, everything is IG, everything is Rolls Royces, everything is Ferraris. And I think that the pressure to fit in and to be on IG or to be on these other social platforms is something that I never had, or we never had in the brokerage
Right.
business.
Right.
We had to go down to the local, bar in Faneuil Hall and look good with a nice suit on and a watch, and hopefully you'd fit in. These guys are much different, and the challenges are there. There's very little mentorship there, and there's a lot of people driving Lamborghinis on social media. And so to answer your question, I think it's tougher for young guys nowadays, young men and women, to really with the pressure to fit in with social media. I think it's much bigger than when I was out there.
Yeah, so that's a good segue. We've mentioned mentorship a number of times, and that's a lot of what you're doing in the present as well. And you've
Mm-hmm.
got a lot of insights and lessons, some of which are negative. Oh, I wish I would have had this at this time. This wasn't good mentoring, and then a lot of positive ones. So,
Yeah.
why don't you tell people what it is that you've learned and what it is that you do?
Yeah, so 2016, working on establishing a data company, which I continue to do, and that's been a good business for me. It's helped me to support my family and educate my daughter, and then along the way, because I was in data and people were occasionally getting in trouble in data with different things such as healthcare,
Mm.
healthcare fraud, kickbacks. I still had a number of people in securities, whether they were stockbrokers or doing penny stocks, would come to me and say, "Hey, Coleman. I know you got some experience with this. I'm in trouble. Can you help me out?" And at first it was kind of working as a companion with them.
Okay.
At first I wasn't charging people any money. I said, "Look, well, we can talk every day. I'll tell you my experience. I can help you with an attorney. I'll tell you how you should interact with prosecutors and FBI agents because that's very important." Um, and then I started taking a look at some of the mistakes I made, like one in particular, 46 letters at sentencing talking about how great a guy I was, not
Yeah.
taking any responsibility for my crime. So um, I started saying, what if you didn't do 46 letters? What if you did five? And there were people that knew you well, and they talked about how remorseful you are, if you are in fact remorseful, about some of the things that you're doing now to start to recreate your life.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so the first client I had, I sent him a letter. I sent him a direct mail letter, and I saw he was indicted for healthcare fraud. And I called him a number of times. He didn't take my call. And then I was driving my father home one night on a Saturday night, and he said, "Your letter's been in my drawer for a year. I was hoping I would never have to call you, but I need your help." And it charged him a nominal amount of money, very little. And for the time I spent with him, I probably, you know, should charge him a lot more. But it was I got to establish a relationship with the guy and be friends with him and his wife and his family, and did the type of work that I wish someone had helped me with along the way. That I had given me the insight with, along the way, as far as
Yeah.
as far as the letters and the guidance. So I started doing that with him, and decided to put together for him what was called a sentencing narrative, which would be a document that we would submit to the judge that would talk about who this guy really was, that decision that he made, and that was helpful. And then I decided to get on LinkedIn, and I started to go out and talk with college professors and start to tell a little bit of his story without naming him. I've got someone that's a contact of mine. He's made some mistakes, and he'd like to tell his story. And we started doing that with a number of people: New Mexico State, Boston University, University of Arizona, University of Michigan. We started going out and telling the story about, how he made that decision, the pressures involved, the Rolex watch, the night suits, living in South Florida, the pressure to be a big shot. And it was well
Hmm.
received. And a couple of the students and professors wrote letters to the judge. And, he was sentenced about a month ago. He was facing 44 months in prison. He had some factors in his case that helped him out. The judge said, in my 30 years as an attorney, as a prosecutor, as a federal judge, I've never seen anybody do anything like this.
Hmm.
Going out to colleges and speaking without getting
Yeah,
paid, just
yeah.
doing it on your own. And he sentenced my client to time served. And time served in Florida for healthcare fraud is unheard of. Not I feel like I positioned him to look at sentencing, but he had some other variables that helped him to get that sense. We got down to the end and said, should we pay some money or should we not? And we made the decision to come in with $100,000 as a gesture towards a $6 million restitution. And I thought 100 was a drop in the bucket. The judge was blown away by that. He was very impressed. He said, nobody makes
Hmm.
restitution. The fact that you're coming with $100,000, I can see that you've changed this community service that you've done. So, he was able to secure, time served. I also helped someone else in that case that also got time served. So those were a couple of clients that I work with. I had a client a short time ago that was involved with a pre-IPO scheme where they were not disclosing to customers where they own the stock from. And he was on the phone with an FBI agent telling him that there was no commission. In fact, he was making a 50% commission, and he was facing 7 years in prison. We positioned him well with his pre-sentence investigation interview with his letters, and he ended up getting 2 years in prison. So not his dream, but better than 7 years. So that's the type of work that I've been doing. I see myself as a companion throughout the journey. I've been in spiritual direction for over 20 years. As you can tell from my story, sometimes I've
Yeah, yeah.
used it to my benefit, and sometimes I haven't. And I feel like today I am. And I'm in 2019. I was, I guess we're coming up on COVID, and I was feeling kind of dry. There were no AA meetings, and I was really thinking about doing this retreat called the 19th Annotation, the Spiritual Exercise of St. Ignatius. I was interested in
Okay.
it.
Yeah,
I had
yeah.
taken a couple of tries at it before, never completed it, and I met a woman who said, I can help you with that." And I went through that, and it was a life-changing experience for me. And in the middle of it, my mother passed away, and and I still talk with this woman on a regular basis as a spiritual director. And she, I've told her about the business, and she talks about it being a spiritual companion. So I feel like in many ways I'm a companion to the person. She talks
Yeah.
about it as a walk of mercy. She talks about it as a restorative walk of mercy where you're helping restore the lives of the families. There's some people that will take this and not change the way that they look at it. They might even go to trial and get 8 or 10 years in prison. And for in many cases, life is kind of over at that point. It's tough to get a
Right.
job. There's many people that take responsibility for it. Not only take responsibility, but they've got that change. They say, okay, I can do what I did here. I'm not going to do this going forward. There's a different chapter in my life. And those are the guys that I really like to work with. Those are the guys that I do with, And so not only am I helping them through the process, I help them and say, okay, what's next? So I've got, one client is doing marketing right now for rehabs, so she's helping people that have opiate addictions get beds at treatment centers. She's doing great work. I've got another client that's doing some marketing right now for mass tort cases. He's doing great work. So the people that say like, okay, I can see what I did wrong. Let me see what's next here.
Yeah.
Those are the people I typically do best with and enjoy working with the most.
Yeah. And so shifting a little bit, you get to engage with, as you're going to college, classes with younger people and telling them, about your history and what you wish you would have known and would have done differently. And, I don't imagine that a lot of young people are making use of 12-step programs. It's sort of like, I do a lot of work with anger management stuff, and most people don't go to anger management unless the judge tells them they have to, right? So there's
Right.
things have to get kind of bad for that. And I doubt that when it comes to spiritual direction or anything analogous to it, that younger people are getting much of that either. And so we're caught in this problem of, as you've put it before, poor mentoring. You're not getting
Hmm.
mentors, or as you put it, I like this, companions, people who are not at a higher level than you, but are sort of on the same level but can support you. A lot of young people are just not
Hmm.
getting that. And one of the things that really came out to me, and I was thinking about this in terms of what we do in business ethics classes, is you talked about these priorities of self, firm, client, and
Hmm.
one is the high priority, one is, well, it's nice, if you can help the firm as well, then the
Yeah.
client, they come essentially last. And I think a lot of young people are
Yeah.
still getting those messages constantly. um and so it's important to have the sort of work that you're doing, the sort of stories that you're telling, but it also does seem sort of like a drop in the bucket. And
Hmm.
what could be like similar to the support that a 12-step program provides for younger people who are in college, whether they realize they need it or not, or a mentor who's a good mentor. How do they get that sort of thing? Or is it just sort of, well, luck of the
Yeah. I
draw?
mean, well, I mean, not every mistake is ending in the FBI showing up at your house telling you that you're going to prison for a long
Yeah,
time.
very
So,
true.
but but pardon me, but sorry about that. So not every mistake is ending up like the FBI coming to your house, but I think like in my case, and in the case of this gentleman that I was telling you about that just got sentenced to time served with healthcare fraud, had I known that my behavior could end in the potential of losing my liberty and my career and
Okay, so
my finances,
consequences.
which was really the
Yeah.
last thing. The last thing. I had never had any thought of that happening. That I felt like I was in an unregulated industry. And one day I was reading an article about some guys that got arrested for doing something, and I said, "Oh my God, that's what we do. That's what we've been doing. I hope that they don't catch up." And so I think if a person is going to be going to work at Exxon or JP Morgan or Morgan Stanley, or if they're going to be going to business school and starting their own VC and raising capital,
Hmm.
there's going to be opportunities all the time to cut corners. Let me
Yeah.
pay you a bribe to make this bill go away if you're working for a big company. I'll put some money into your startup, but you got to kick back my friend 30% if we're going to do that. Or if the person gets the money into the startup and finances get out of control, they start spending the money on themselves. There is always an opportunity to cut corners in business. And I think that if you have some sort of idea, like, okay, here's what the consequences could potentially be. In some cases, for a stockbroker, you might lose your license, you might lose your ability to practice. A lawyer might lose his ability to practice law. I'm talking with a couple of doctors right now that overprescribed opiates. They're facing
Oh,
prison time, but on top of it, they're not going to be doctors anymore. And so those are potential problems, or you could be facing a prison sentence. So I think
yeah.
getting out there and talking in classrooms, which I think that my service is helpful. We don't ask for any money for the service. We'll bring our clients in and say this is community service, this is volunteer work. If you like what you heard and it's helpful, would appreciate if you might write a letter to the judge and talk with them about the help that my client gave. But we're not asking for any money. We'll come in and we'll talk about, look, you know, um, we didn't think that asking a doctor to write 30 or 40 prescriptions to people that he never saw before for a back or knee brace was that big a deal. But we submitted $30 million in claims to Medicare, and now we're facing 100 months in prison. Now, most people don't know that could happen. But if you're getting these messages on college campuses or in other areas, perhaps people will think twice about, maybe I shouldn't do that. There'll still be people that think they can get away with it. There's still people that are getting arrested today for pump and dumps. There's still people that are getting
Yeah.
arrested
Yeah.
for Medicare fraud. But I think with our company, if we're going out and we're not working with hundreds of people. I mean, I think maybe right now we've got a handful of people that we're getting into their sentencing process. but I think that if we can, use this type of message, build some case studies, talk about, some of the mistakes that have been made. If you can take that one guy that was going to go out and get into a telemarketing business and start doing healthcare
Yeah.
fraud, and he's facing 100 months in prison. If you can save one guy, I think that these talks are very worthwhile.
Well, and there's a sort of extra effect as well, because if he's not doing that, now granted, somebody else might be doing it, at least he's not producing all those
Yeah,
victims. And I mean,
yeah,
some of them might still wind up being victims anyway, but at least you've created a kind of chain of causality that leads to somebody not doing that. And I'm kind of curious. So, we can talk about consequences as like a baseline, and I'm not against trying to scare people with consequences. I think that's a great
yeah,
idea.
yeah.
But something else that you've talked about, a great example of this is, the letters that were submitted that didn't talk about remorse or regret, or, a term that you're going to know from spiritual direction, metanoia,
Mhm.
repentance,
Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's so you can't like push a button and produce that, but
Yeah.
that seems like something that's not only worth aiming at, but it's worthwhile for the
Hmm.
person who experiences it, because then they can say,
Hmm.
"Wow, there's better things in life." And
Yeah.
you mentioned, for example, getting to see your daughter grow up, and I think
Hmm.
that's something that can't be put in monetary terms at all,
Yeah.
but it's definitely a value, right?
Hmm.
So getting that across to younger people. I mean, I when I talk about this in class with them, I see them nodding along. I'm never quite
Hmm.
sure how committed they are to that, or how much they
Yeah.
understand
Yeah.
that. But that does seem to be a really important aspect of this as well.
I mean, it's a process. I mean, I think if you've had that experience or a like experience, how do you tackle that? It's, it could be some sort of prayer, it could be some sort of meditation, it
Mm,
could be some sort of it could be some sort of consuming content that is around an ethical, good way of living that might
yeah,
strike
yeah,
you. That's some of the stuff that I read today. That I like reading about people that are trying to um, build their businesses the right way, live a good ethical way. I consume a lot of like Jesuit content. I consume a lot of different type of content around meditation, around
yeah,
things such
yeah.
as Richard Rohr out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. We're really like identifying with the second part of life. I feel like I'm in the second part of life right now. Like, as much as I still get interested, like, I can make a lot of money in my data business, or I can go off and buy this car and do this. Really at this stage of my life at 57 years old, after being through what I've been through, I feel like that I'm starting to get an idea of being able to separate the important from the unimportant. And it's been a process for me, and I'm still like working on it. And in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and in the ninth step of the amends, it says there's a long period of reconstruction ahead. And I can tell you, like at 4 o'clock in the morning when I was standing in the parking lot and the guy had the badge that said FBI, I got the thought in my mind that said, like, all right, the deal's up. There's a long period of reconstruction ahead. Like, this is not going to be over anytime soon. And I'm still working on it now. That was in 2012. It's 2024. I'm still recreating my life now.
I mean, that might be a very helpful message for, I
Mm-hmm.
think, a lot of people as well. And I'm sure you've got all sorts of experience and reflections on this. That, yeah, it's not finished. You don't just like check off a bunch of things, reach a certain point, and now you're a good person.
Yeah.
We've always got parts of ourselves that, I mean, sometimes you clear away one thing and you say, "Oh, I didn't see this thing here, and now I need
Yeah.
to work
Yeah.
on this as well."
Yeah. Yeah.
And that might be a very helpful message for younger people, I think, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's a guy in one of my 12-step groups that says, like, I stopped drinking, and then I started, going to the track every day, and then I started,
Yeah.
playing the stock market, and then I started doing this, and I started doing that, and I'm wondering what God has in store for me next, and so I think the people that do have the addictive behavior, like I said, in Alcoholics Anonymous, they say that the bottles are just a symptom, right? So I think they say that you need to get down the causes and conditions and take a look at yourself and say, what is making me act like this? Well, why
Yeah.
is my life so unmanageable today? And I've done some of that work, and I continue to do that work, and I feel like, like you said to me before, like about consequences, like not everybody needs to get arrested. I didn't need to have this happen to me. I feel like there's a possibility that I could be sitting in Morgan Stanley right now, counting the years to my retirement with the golden watch, but I just chose to go a different way. I can't blame it on of not having good mentors. That's the way I was wired. And I'm trying to unwire myself right now by continuing to do spiritual work and self-reflective work to make sure that I don't make those mistakes again. I mean, over the course of 12 years, I've had several opportunities where people come to me and say, "Hey, I know you can't do stocks anymore in
Oh,
America, but we're making money running stocks in Jersey. What do you think?" And my first question is, well, what's a ton of money? How much? And these shiny objects, they still look good to me once in a while. But at the end of the day, what looks good to me is 57 years old, a quiet life, married today, raising my 11-year-old, getting her through high school, getting her through college, and thinking about what's next, and spending a lot of time taking care of my father, who's 86, and just
oh,
really,
yeah,
I just continue to think about that second part of life. I'm in the second part of life right now.
yeah. Well, this is a great conversation, and what a story. And
Hmm.
it's a really, I mean, I could listen to you talk about it for hours, I think, but I want to
Hmm.
be respectful of your time. And I always
Thank you.
let guests have sort of a last word if there's anything that you'd like to pass on in
Okay.
particular to viewers or.
Well, I'm really grateful for the invite. I'm really grateful that you and I met, and really appreciative. And it was really good to talk today and just talk about my experience. And I guess I wasn't prepared for that question. I guess I would just say that I am grateful for the experience that I had to an extent. I wish I didn't have to hurt anybody in my life. My family is incredibly important to me.
Yeah,
I feel like that I was called to be in this particular family. That God has called me to be in this particular family that I'm in, and they mean the world to me. And I still struggle with the fact that I put my family through a lot. But on a personal note, I'm glad that I went through what I went through, because I know that I wouldn't be the person that I am today if I didn't go through that experience. I think that there's a chance that I'd still be out there trying to pull penny stock scams to buy the next shiny object. And where would I be
yeah.
going? Like what type of life would I have then? At the end of the day, where would I be? I had a very close friend of mine, Peter, who was my best friend that just passed away a couple of months ago of a
Mm,
heart attack, and we talk a lot about the white collar and the prison consulting business. And my spiritual director is encouraging me to explore being a prison chaplain, and I'm not sure if I'm ready to take that step yet. And Peter says to me, "Do you know what type of life that you would have, like if you know explored that and went into it, like how the contacts that you would make and the relationships that you would build by doing that? You realize like what type of life you would have at the end of your life?" And he said, "Far different from when I met you when you're doing penny stocks. It would just be such a great life. And so I feel like the best is yet to come for me, as long as I continue
mm.
on with spiritual growth and trying to do the right thing. I feel like there'll probably be a lot more opportunities out there that I can grow from."
Oh, that's a great message. So thanks so much for being generous
Mm.
with your time and telling the story. And I look forward to future conversations.
Me too. Thank you so much. I'm grateful, and I look forward to catching up with you again and sharing with you what we're working on.